Welcome everyone to the first in a series about starting an army in the tabletop game Warhammer 40k. Today's subject, the Tau. Some of you are probably wondering, why the Tau first? Why not Space Marines? Well, for starters, I've played more games of Tau than Space Marines, and my Tau army is larger than my Space Marines army. Secondly, this series is not about one army over another because one is better than the other. This is about getting you into the game with the army you have picked and trying to avoid spending more money than necessary just to start playing the game. With that out of the way, let's start with getting you into the Tau Empire. So, first question. What should I start with? What is your first purchase going to be? A lot of people will tell you that the start collecting boxes are a good first step. While in most cases starting there is a great idea, in the case of the Tau and Space Marines, you should actually make that your second purchase into this army, if you decide you like them after playing them for a bit. Some of you already knew what I was talking about the moment I said, and Space Marines. The Kill Team box. This is a great box to get you into the game and learning the basics in general, as it comes with 2 squads from 2 armies, datasheets to use them, and the rulebook for the entire game, which, if you didn't have it, is necessary to play the game. This game will teach you the most basic concepts for the Tau. So, let's assume for a minute that you don't have the materials you'll need to assemble these. In addition to this box, the basic requirement you'll need are some snips and plastic glue. Note that I say plastic glue and not super glue. While you can use super glue only holds the pieces together, meaning that if they fall off the table, which, by the way, will happen at some point or another, they can break apart. That's bad. That's where the plastic glue comes in. Plastic glue bonds the plastic together, rather than holding these 2 pieces of plastic together. The 2 become one. So, if they fall on the floor, they are almost never going to break. That said, though, there is still the possibility they could break, so always bring your plastic glue with you wherever you go with your models for emergency repairs. Where can you get this plastic glue and snips? The same place you got your models, either your friendly local gaming store, FLGS, or from Games Workshop itself, either online or in-store. In the case of your friendly local gaming store, they may have an alternative, cheaper glue like plastic cement. This works essentially the same and might be a little cheaper. Snips can also be purchased from nearly anywhere. The hardware store, big department stores, arts and crafts stores, even the grocery store and supermarket might have them. With all of that in mind, I have found that purchasing directly from Games Workshop and getting a pair of their snips and glue is the best option, though it is also the most expensive one. So, if you're on a budget of less than $100 to get into the game, perhaps looking to alternate stores and alternate options is the best option for you. For now, let's say you've bought your box, glue, and snips. In total, you've spent $80 or less if you went the budget route. Good job, you're almost ready to begin. The next step is assembling your miniatures and playing the game. You could play the Kill Team game itself, and that's really not a bad idea. You get to practice using individual models as squads, and you're almost guaranteed to try the Tau Empire's unique special rule for Overwatch, supporting fire. Units that charge a friendly unit within 6 inches of said friendly unit can fire Overwatch to support that unit. What does all that information mean? Well, unfortunately, this is not a rules breakdown video. You'll have to find someone else to explain the intricacies of the game, of which there's a lot. Like, a lot. That aside, today is solely about the Tau. So, let's say you've played a few games at this point. You're probably thinking something like, man, I want to expand my army. First off, you'll need the Tau Empire Codex. Purchasing the Gamer's Edition for Codex Tau Empire is only $24 on ebook or iBooks. Otherwise, you're going to be spending $50 on a physical copy. Now that's not a bad idea, but if you're on a budget, it can help to just have the rules instead of the fluff and the rules. So, with that in mind, there are, as of the making of this video, 2 routes you can take. The first is to complete your most basic force by purchasing the Start Collecting Tau Empire box. Let's break down what you'll get in this box. Another group of Fire Warriors. You now have 20 of them. Yay, more things to shoot with. But wait, there's more. You now have your first HQ choice. With that, you now have the ability to create a bound list instead of an unbound list. I know I said earlier that this isn't a rules breakdown video, but let's briefly refer to what bound and unbound really means. Having a bound list in the rulebook means having a minimum of one HQ choice, in this case your Ethereal, and two troops choices, in this case your Fire Warriors. With this comes a bunch of upper limitations, but for now we'll just say that those aren't important. What is important is that now you have access to Warlord traits with your HQ. Within a bound list, you get two special rules, Ideal Mission Commander and Objective Secured. So, with Ideal Mission Commander, if you get a Warlord trait that you don't like, you can choose to re-roll your trait. With Objective Secured, your troops gain this rule. It means that even if there is an enemy right next to your objective, you still get the points for holding it if you have an objective card saying to grab this objective. Assuming you've played a few games of Kill Team, you understand what this means. Like I said, this isn't a rule breakdown video, so just know this is what you gain from the units you now have. Let's get back to what's in the box. So, two troops and an HQ choice. What else do you get with this? Your first elite choice, which in this case are the battle suits you see. As a side note, some people use these battle suits as their entire army. But that's a video for another day. The point here is that you have 3 out of a possible 9 for a squad. If you wanted to, at this point, since you have so few, you could run these guys as single units, and your list would still be bound. With that in mind, however, in a bound list, you may only run 3 elites choices. If you wanted to run any more elites later on, these suits would need to be a single unit. Lastly, let's talk about the drones that come with the suits and the Fire Warriors. At this point, you should have 10 drones from the units you've gotten so far. If you wanted to, you wouldn't have to run these as unit upgrades, but instead as individual units. While I would generally recommend not doing this, there are situations where you would want to do so. By now, you may have discovered the Marker Light drone. The Marker Light boosts the ballistic skill of other units, but not the unit that shot the Marker Lights. The Tau are all about teamwork. So, give the drones Marker Lights. They have a special rule called Relentless. Marker Lights are considered heavy weapons, so if a unit moves, they can only hit on a roll of a 6. Drones can zip around the battlefield firing off Marker Lights at their full ballistic skill. Well, great, now you're hitting on a roll of 5. What a drastic improvement. That said, everyone else can benefit from any hits they do make. I can hear you asking, how do I improve my hitting chances with this thing? The answer is simple. Run them as unit upgrades for your battlesuits. The battlesuits can take a support system called a drone controller. This means they fire at the controller's ballistic skill. Now you're hitting 50% of your shots. Statistically, of course. Obviously, this means that those shots don't benefit the battlesuits, but the basic weapons of the Fire Warriors are incredibly strong. Don't underestimate them. Now you probably want to know, after looking through what the suits can do in your Codex, what you should give them. There's very little you really shouldn't give them, but in the long term, for expansion, I would recommend not giving them burst cannons. They are the same strength as Fire Warrior weapons, but will cost more point-wise in the long run. If you want burst cannons, just run more Fire Warriors instead. So what should you run if that's not going to help? Well, let's assume for a minute you're running drones with the unit as upgrades. With that in mind, I recommend 2 different weapons and a stimulant injector. What are these 2 weapons? Whatever the situation demands. Are you fighting a horde of troops with low toughness like the Astra Militarum? A flamer and either a second flamer or a fusion blaster to punch through any tanks in your way. The flamer will take care of the normal troops. The fusion blaster will destroy any tanks in front of you. Are you facing Space Marines of any sort? 2 plasma rifles will eat their armor as though it were sugar against water. The situation will dictate what you grant them. You may ask why the stimulant injector and not a shield generator. The answer is you have drones that can take the shield upgrade for half the price of a shield generator. The stimulant injector will allow you to reroll any wounds you may have failed to save. Generally, if you run an army the size of this one, your opponent will have very little that can instant kill your suits. What we just went over was the first of 2 options that you can use. The second of them is to buy Pathfinders. There's 2 ways to do that. buy the Pathfinders individually, or 2, as of this video, Games Workshop is selling the optimized Pathfinder team, which includes a Devilfish, the Tau Transport. With the rise of 7th edition formations, rather than assemble your Pathfinders with a normal configuration of pulse carbines with marker lights, instead give 6 of them the special weapons that are available on the sprue, the Ion Rifle and the Rail Rifle. This will force you to run them as 2 units of 5 at a maximum, and this will make them very expensive, but Pathfinders are the only ones who can take these relatively cheap long-range weapons. Markolites have recently shifted over to drones with the rise of 7th edition, so giving your army some relatively cheap support is a good idea. Just remember to give them a bonding knife ritual and a team leader, the Shas'ui, if you don't want them running at the first sign of trouble. Assuming you bought the Devilfish with the Pathfinders, you can use him as an upgrade for your foot soldiers, the Pathfinders, or the Fire Warriors. This will give them some extra protection from enemy fire and allow them to move more quickly on objectives, which means more chances at victory points. You can also separately purchase a Cadre Fireblade for $20, split your Fire Warriors into 2 teams of 5, and you'd have a bound list that way too. At some point, no matter which way you took to get your army, following up by taking the other path will be your next step. At this point, you will have spent $250-ish in total on the Tau. That's not bad for an army that size. Ask other Tau players where to go from here, and most will tell you more suits and/or a Riptide. While these are correct answers, experiment and experience for yourself before you make any purchasing decisions. Ask a friend or another hobbyist if you can try using their models for some games to see if you like or dislike a model and what it does. Find your own answer.